All right, and welcome everyone to this work session of the Loveland School Board. Call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert.
Here.
Mrs. Jarenick.
Here.
Mrs. Mangan.
Here.
Dr. Swetchenau.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here.
Thank you. The agenda was published the end of last week. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
A second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jarenick.
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenau.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. All right, then we have our minutes from the January 21st meeting. Are there any additions, corrections to the minutes as presented?
No.
A motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenau.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarenick.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right. Agenda item 2.1, board statements. What was the, just if we wanted to say anything?
Yeah.
As a board? One thing to say, the governor's proposal for the budget came out yesterday, and John's doing some review of that, and he can say anything he wants about that as well. Just the conversation we had today was about the fact that we're a guarantee district. There's some question about guarantee districts in there. There's the only place he's proposing any reductions, but also a reminder, this is only the governor's proposal. The State House is also going to be taking a look at it, so we want to encourage all of our folks in Loveland to continue to be advocating to all of our state representatives to fully fund the fair school funding formula, so that we at least get the guarantee that that we have and currently, and so that's going to continue to be important, and hopefully folks are staying on top of that. Lynn, anything else from a governance standpoint, things that are coming up that you want to highlight?
I think obviously we're going through policies tonight. There's, and I think, we're talking about all of our touch points on the school funding and making sure that we're meeting with all of our legislators, local governments, Chamber of Commerce, and, just keep continuing to cascade that. There was an interesting article or interesting report that came out from the OEPI did they go by OEPI? Mm-hmm. That John always references when he's doing his financial reports for us, or when he's doing the forecast. And it just came in email this afternoon, but it's a really interesting analysis of 20-year look at state funding in Ohio. And the headline is that Ohio in that 20-year period has dropped from being the 35th lowest state in terms of funding for public schools to the 45th. And and when you adjust increases in state funding for inflation over that 20-year period, the state is negative. So there's, they're below the inflationary adjustment. So it's worth a read. It looks at enrollment across the state. So that's a good report to read and take a look at. But the legislation seems to be fast and furious in terms of, coming out of the State House with the new legislator already. So we just need to continue to stay on top of it.
Well, the two of you, as we're talking about legislative stuff, want to talk about the breakfast that we're going to be partaking in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so Hamilton County ESC is going to be hosting a breakfast for local legislators and superintendents, treasurers, and board members. So I've gone ahead and registered myself and Mr. Broadwater, and as well as Lynn and Jonathan as well for that. So we're registered. It's on February 21st. And just excited to be in a room to be able to tell our story and let the legislators hear from us, but also for us to be able to hear from them what they're thinking. To kind of piggyback, again, Dr. Fleeter is the the person from OEPI that does all of the work. He has been who I've been linking in the QR codes where I've said, are you interested in learning more, whether I'm talking to staff, or also just presenting to the board, or even to our local partners when we've met. Dr. Fleeter does a lot of really good work in terms of studying, and he knows how all the formulas have worked over time. So he's really been working primarily for the last 30 years on this. He works out of Ohio University, so just very blessed to be able to have his understanding and his historical perspective. Additionally, I think I'm going to be doing a deep dive on what Governor DeWine's proposed budget looks like and reporting to the board at the February regular meeting. Be able to speak in a more educated manner on it at that point. There's just a lot of questions. If you saw the press release, or you saw the dais where he presented the budget, I mean, there's I don't even know how many reams of paper that make up this budget proposal. So there's a lot of feverish reading right now and interpreting what that's going to look like. So hope to have more on February 18th.
I think one of the things that's not specific to public schools, but is more just legislative, that they've changed, at the State House, I think they've changed how like you won't know if something is gonna be on the agenda. So like they can change it up to an hour before and add something to the agenda. So if it's something you wanted to come and, be present for and to comment on, they're making it really hard to come and be present for that. So it seems, as much as we talk about sunshine laws, it seems very counter to that right now.
The only thing I would add is, first, it's good that we have legislators that are open to listening to us on the 21st, and there are legislators in the area that want to hear from us,
Yeah.
which is good. We've worked over the last few years to make sure we're telling our story, and we're continuing to meet, John and I and Mr. Setters, on what is it that we would like to tell our story about, and how do we get that in the hands of some of our community members who are interested, and let them know what they should be maybe talking to their legislators about. So we'll have more information about that after John presents next board meeting. So.
Great. The three of us did go to one of these sessions last year at Claremont County, and it was, I think, a definitely worthwhile time. John and I narrowly avoided getting COVID for Mike that day, but other than that, it was time really well spent. I think talking with legislators and hearing their perspectives, and I think they were definitely enlightened by some of the things they heard from people from around the county, so it's a good thing. All right. Anything else from any board members? Any questions about any of that or comments? All right, then let's move on then to item 2.2, first reading policies. And John's been spending a lot of time digging into policies. We had a policy committee meeting yesterday afternoon to go over some of this, and we've got a number here that we're going to be looking at just as a first reading tonight, and then we'll approve those at our next meeting. So encourage you all to spend some time reading through these. We're not going to walk through all of these tonight, but we want to make sure we highlight what they are, and then have everyone review those for our next meeting. And then there are a few that we pulled out of the longer list that we will waive the first reading of tonight because they're timely in terms of things that possibly should have maybe passed a little bit sooner, or simply for operational sake, we think it's important to have them in force as soon as possible. So there are a handful of those that we'll look at later, but this is the first reading. So John, other things you want to say about these that we have the first reading of tonight?
Yeah, so I'm gonna use a modified slides that I showed yesterday to the policy committee. So anything that's in orange is gonna be what we're asking you to waive the first reading for, and put in place tonight through vote. I wanted to break it down this way because I think it makes a lot of sense to see House Bill 214 with the allowing religious expression days has had like a waterfall effect on all of these other policies. So really what it's doing is adding the language that is referenced in the religious expression days. And then likewise with Senate Bill 29, as we know, this has gone through several iterations where essentially we have to report out to parents if a device was accessed for a multitude of reasons, and so that's now updated in policy EDE. Cash payments for school affiliated events, which is tied to House Bill 147. This is just practices and policies that are going to be put in place that are tied to now having to accept cash for all events here at the district. House Bill 47 affects the AEDs with the requiring of that, and it updates language obviously in first aid, but also there's a policy in JHDG, which is reporting child abuse or mandatory training that staff would need to be trained on AEDs. I kind of put the rest of these in what I would call language cleanup, even though there are specific pieces of legislation they're tied to. Professional hiring and support staff recruiting, as well as school year, school calendar, health education, and then the family life education. That's just tying up some language that's changed tied to House Bill 168. It's interesting that House Bill 168 also affects bidding requirements, so it must have been a large piece of policy that was passed there, or law that was passed. And also, as President Eilert mentioned earlier, minutes, executive sessions, and bidding requirements. The state is changing bidding requirement thresholds, and it's going to go up over the next couple years. And so what this allows us to do is reference state law instead of having an amount that has to then be updated next year and then be updated the following year. So that's kind of a run through of all these. Again, the ones that are not orange, this is just the first reading, which is what you're actually looking at right now. Later on, we'll get to the waiving of the first reading and potentially adopting them tonight if you so choose. Any questions on any of those?
John, just for purposes of any public members who are watching this, all of these board policies are accessible through the website, and not necessarily until they've been accepted and updated, but if anybody has questions about these, the current language is available, the proposed language is in our agenda and attached, and then
Yes.
in the future, after they're accepted, they'll be updated on the website.
Exactly. So we go through a process with OSBA where once they're approved, I put them on a spreadsheet, I let them know that they're released, and then they go through and actually put them into our policy in board docs. All of these policies, whether they existed or not prior to tonight, are either in the first read or in the waiving, and those are all public, so you can see that. And if it's something where there's a policy change, they're, instead of red line, they're green line. That's how board docs does it. It's proprietary green, I think. So you can see how the policies have been updated. Also, I did want to say, just kind of reiterate that this policy tracker exists. So, you know, for the board and even our staff here, you can go out and actually see the OSBA bulletins that are tied to these specific items. We did get the bulletin very late for September. It was more like the early December bulletin with the September quarterly update, and that's why you see that there's only one item in December that was released later in the month, actually closer to winter break for us. And then just keep in mind we had adopted these policies in March of 2024, and so there was some catch up that we had to do. And so I feel like after our next policy meeting, which it looks like everyone's accepted it towards the end of February, we should be able to be all caught up, and then we can just meet quarterly for these updates as they come out. So we're getting there.
Great.
Yeah, I don't have any further. I asked my questions. It was more about the systems around implementing some of the policies and just making sure that the cash policy was district only and it didn't apply to
Yep.
adjacent organizations.
Yeah, it's, the cash policy applies to district, or only district funds or funds that we hold.
Yeah,
So there are some like athletics teams that are doing fundraisers in their fundraiser accounts. We hold those, they do sales requisition forms and final forms, so, but any of like the foundation or booster organizations, outside of the other requirements that they have to do with reporting to us, there's really nothing that ties them to that specific policy.
All right, any additional questions on the first reading of policies?
no, just thank you to John and the policy committee, it's a lot of work. And it's so helpful to just see the red line edits.
Eric and I slaved away
Top
formatting on the.
Picking the exact color green.
Yes, thank you, John.
Yes.
All right, so that's just a discussion item, so we don't need any action on that. So moving on to section 3, we have a couple of resolutions, which isn't something we do a whole lot of, but a couple of things that we thought is important to make a statement about in terms of where the board stands in support of a couple of issues. The first is a resolution in support of full implementation of the Fair School Funding Plan, which goes to what we were just discussing. So this is a way that we can, as a board, say clearly that we think it's important that the Fair School Funding Plan continue and be fully funded. Mike, do you want to say more about how this came to be?
Yeah, we met with, I had a superintendent's meeting with Hamilton County ESC, and really was Louis Blessing, who really has been pushing the fact that if we could be united in the front and keeping the Fair School Funding Plan, if all the districts could kind of unite and have this resolution passed, it would mean a lot for legislators to see that we are concerned about it. And so in discussion with the board, it was determined that this would be a good thing for Loveland to do, to show that while the Fair School Funding Plan, we may not fit into the formula, we certainly want to guarantee, and we would like to see it grow a little bit, but we certainly don't want to see it go backwards. But really the initiation of this was to show solidarity, I guess would be the word, with the Hamilton County school districts.
So this comes as basically kind of like in legislation, a clean bill. This is a clean resolution. It's one we want to have it reflect the same message as other districts as well. We have
Right.
specific things that we're advocating for and continue to around fair school funding, but this is something that we're doing in conjunction with other districts to try and have a united message about this. So, questions, comments about the resolution as presented?
I would only comment, I agree with this resolution completely and its intent and its statements. If you look at DeWine's recent budget, the headline was continue the fair school funding to be fully funded, and then the subtext was, but reduce the guarantee by 5% and 10%. And I think about a third of the Ohio districts, 200 or so out of the 600 districts are on the guarantee. So in his current recommendation, 30% of the school districts will be dealing with a significant loss of money in the next 2 years.
Potentially, that's why we want to talk about the next meeting. John noticed there's nuance in that language. It's
Good.
not all necessarily guaranteed districts. We're not sure how many of those districts this will apply to. That's what we want to get clarity about before our next meeting.
Just to opine on what I think is,
Yeah,
what I think it's getting at is more than likely there are districts that are on the guarantee that are spending over $30,000 per pupil, which is nearly double the state average. We're below the state average. And so having worked with Mike Sobel, who was, on the Fair School Funding Board, and he just put out a great book that OASBO, my professional organization, put out, explaining how really property taxes work. He's really like the go-to school funding czar. When we look at the guarantee, there's a lot of reasons why districts could be on a guarantee. And so my hope is that if there is any kind of reduction of the guarantee, it would not affect us here in Loveland and similar districts that are nearby that are also on the guarantee. So, but time will tell.
Right, and obviously, part of the issue is, this is merely a suggestion.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we've heard from get rid of it altogether to, well, we'll cut some of it for some districts sometimes. But I think a lot of it is the divide and conquer, and that's why, going back to your comments, making sure that we speak with one voice is as important as it gets.
Yeah.
But, you know, not all districts are the same.
Right, so
And some
continue.
districts are like, I'm happy with the way it is right now.
Yeah,
And this kind of furthers that, because you could have districts that are happy that they're not on the guarantee, that are going to seek to gain mightily with a fully funded fair school funding plan. So I think that, you know, the way some of this is worded, sometimes it's divisive in just how it's presented.
Right.
So, and you know, Mike will probably tell you too, there's varying levels of engagement with superintendents and treasurers and boards across the state. So I'm just glad that you're all engaged and we're having this conversation
Yeah.
tonight, because it's really important for the longevity of the school district.
yeah. Yeah, and Senator Blessing is really encouraging us to advocate.
I think that Eric made a very good point in that we in Loveland look at the state funding and say it's not appropriate, but there are plenty of districts out there that do believe it is more than appropriate, and there are superintendents that are not sitting in the same seat as I am in terms of funding, and so that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult when you're advocating for yourself, but also making sure that you are unified as public school districts, so it's a little tricky.
Great.
All right, any other questions, comments about this resolution as presented? If not, then we have a motion to approve the resolution as presented.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Dr. Swetchenow?
Yeah.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Reverend Eilers?
Yes?
Mrs. Jaranek?
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Then the next resolution that we have is a resolution reiterating the district's support for all students. This comes in response, obviously, across the country, there's lots of activity around what's been happening with immigration, and a lot of concerns among those that are immigrants in our country, both those who do not have legal status and those who have legal status. As a school district, there's been a Supreme Court ruling that makes clear that every student is entitled to an education. We don't check on legal status for students as they come to us. We're here to care for children in our community and provide for their education. I had the opportunity last week to meet with an immigrant family that's here that our church works with. Mom's primary concern was, can someone come to the school and take our kids without us being aware of that? And again, they're here legally, but all the concerns about could something happen, they get caught up, something gets miscommunicated, and suddenly they don't have their kids with them. So this is a resolution that we want to just make clear that where our priorities are in terms of caring for children, and to reassure our families, particularly those that are immigrants, refugees, that we have policies in place that offer care and protection for them. We have a little statement that would go in that elaborates a little bit on this, because in the actual resolution it's really referencing our policies in this regard. Just to make sure as they read it, it's clear that someone can't simply come into the school and demand their children and walk out with them, that we have policies and protections in place. Mike had been in contact with other district superintendents last week, beginning of last week, had a good conversation about policies that all districts have, how to best handle that, best practices, and then met with our administrators, met with our EL teachers. Do you want to say any more about that and how those conversations went?
Well, yeah, to your point, there's been a lot of questions, right, when it came out, and so we just wanted to make sure we clarified what our policies are. We have policies in place that are appropriate. We work with law officials quite often, whether it be local officials or federal, and we always make sure that we maintain the safety of our students and take care of our students first. Their FERPA rights are always going to be contained, and make sure that we take care of that. So I met with our teachers that do work with our non-English speaking families, and they had concerns just like their families had concerns. What does that mean for their families? And so we've reiterated the policies we have, and we will always work with law enforcement. We'll make sure that we do what we need to do legally. As far as working with kids, if somebody were to come into the building, a law enforcement agent was to come into the building, I met with our administrators, our principals. We will make sure that we meet, and we make sure that the FERPA rights are withheld. If there's a subpoena or warrant, then that's a different story, but for now, just making sure that we all know what our processes and procedures are. No different than what we've had, but I think it's important to just reiterate that we do have a process, and first and foremost, we want to take care of our kids. That's why we're here. And we will communicate with families if there is a situation where a building administrator is talking to a law enforcement official. They will always talk to the families and make sure that they're aware. We do have in loco parentis, but we want to make sure we call the parents as well. So I think just to reiterate that we have all these policies in place, but it was a good reminder for me to meet with our administrators and let them know.
Yeah. It's also a real benefit that we have our school resource officers in all the buildings that help to facilitate any of this as well, and keep the situation calm and make sure the law's being followed, all the proper warrants are there and so forth if something were to happen. So we definitely know that we need to follow the law, but we also want to balance that with protection for our students and our families. So that's what this resolution's about. This is what we would send out as a header for that, just so you hear this. At their February 4th, 2025 work session, the Loveland Board of Education adopted the following resolution. The cited policies in the resolution are currently in place and have been utilized to inform our day-to-day practices in every building throughout the district. Loveland City Schools enrolls and serves all students regardless of immigration status in compliance with federal law. Loveland City Schools does not request or keep records of a student's immigration status. Law enforcement activities, including immigration enforcement, are prohibited on school property during school hours and during school activities without proper legal authorization. Student records are protected and will not be disclosed without a court order or subpoena. As we remain compliant with all relevant state and federal regulations, we want to assure our community of our commitment to safeguard all students and support all families in the Loveland City School District. So that, since the resolution is a little more legal in terms of just going through our policies, we want to make sure we expanded a little bit on that for our families as they receive this, so that they have that assurance of what would take place within our buildings. Questions, comments on the resolution as presented? All right, do we have a motion then to adopt the resolution?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler,
Yes.
Mrs. Jaranek,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchinow.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, now back to then our policies and regulations. We have these 4 policies that will waive the first reading of tonight, to adopt them tonight. So given that we're waiving the first reading, I do think we should just spend a little bit of time on each one to make sure that we're all up to date on what it is that we're adopting. So we'll adopt them all at once. So let's just kind of walk through them now in discussion, and then we'll adopt them all together. So the first one is BDDG. John, do you want to say anything about this once you get that up?
Yes.
Sorry,
Sorry.
CBI myself, yeah.
I had a different order, but.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's the order they're attached is a little bit different. This is just minutes, so what this is talking about, we've always followed this, at least since I've been with the district, I know we've always followed it, which is that when the minutes, or when we have the next meeting, we approve the minutes from the previous meeting. What this allows us to do is if we had, let's just say, one of our work sessions or our business meetings, and we had to have a special meeting 2 days after, I would not have to have the minutes from the meeting 2 days before done at that meeting. We could wait until the next regular meeting. And so that's really the impetus with this, with the regular wording versus succeeding.
Great.
Sounds good.
All right, any other questions about that?
Makes sense.
Great. I'll let you then tell me which one you want to do next.
I'm gonna jump back up to the religious expression days.
Okay.
So, the reason you see this whole policy is new, but this section here in green, the district will use the list of holidays developed by the state superintendent of public education. That is because we're allowed to, if you read down towards the bottom in the notes section. So essentially, instead of us creating some sort of a list here that even the policy says is non-exhaustive, we can just refer to the state superintendent's list, and also knowing that if something was brought forth that met this policy, it would be approved as well. So this essentially just allows for time outside of the school day for these religious expression days. And again, a lot of the other policies that we just did the first read on are affected by this.
Sorry, this is a completely different question, and I know that one of the things that we talked about in the meeting yesterday was that there's a contact person, it could be Dr. Puerta. Do we have a system in place for easily changing that contact person in the future if somebody new is taking it?
That's why we just use the title instead.
So I put the name
Oh, you
there,
did,
but the title's there for that reason.
Okay.
So, if somebody assumed that title and it wasn't Dr. Puerta, we would, obviously, the next ability we would update.
Sounds good.
Yeah. The sample policy suggested actually naming the person.
Right.
And then their title.
Well,
So,
and that just made me think kind of overnight, I'm like, what happens when that person changes?
yeah.
So you have to read through all of these.
It's the opposite of the bidding.
Yeah.
Good thing there's a search function, so.
It is helpful for folks that are using this.
Right.
Someone references the policy, now they know who to talk to instead of having to
Yep.
backtrack, so.
Okay, and then are there any other questions on that? I will jump down to
BDC.
DJ. Yep. Sorry. We're at top to bottom now. Again, bidding, this just takes out the 50,000 that has now been changed to 75,000. But then it also discusses down here, if feasible, all purchases over 10,000, we would have multiple quotes. We do this anyway. The only example of maybe not doing this is we had a water main break right before school began in August, and we have a preferred vendor that we work with, and we obviously wanted to get that corrected quickly so we could have staff here in this building being able to, use the restroom and drink water. But typically, if we're looking over $10,000, we're requesting multiple quotes or an RFP. So,
And the move from 50,000 to 75,000 is by, not local Loveland City School
Yeah.
District. but
yeah, that is Ohio Revised Code.
urban.
And again, this allows this policy to reference Ohio Revised Code, so as it changes, it would stay in line with that and not be out of sync, similar to what we were just talking about.
That's good.
Okay, and then finally, we've got
BDC.
BDC. And it's at the bottom because it was the only one in the December release. And this is executive sessions. The only thing that it does is it discusses either the purchase of property for public purposes or the sale. So what was happening before, as I think districts were saying, for entering into executive session for either or for the purchase of property or for the sale of property. So now it just kind of drills down to, we would have to notice specifically whether it was for purchase or for sale. Two little changes, so.
Okay.
Okay.
There's a little cheat sheet that OSBA provides for those who are chairing the meeting. That's got all of those things listed, so a lot of folks, because you want to get it right, just read off what's there. So I'm sure that was being read off lots of times, and so they wanted the clarity of one or the other. So now I'm sure there will be a new cheat sheet. All right, any other questions about that one? If there are no questions about any of those and no proposed amendments, then we entertain a motion to approve.
To waive.
To waive, I'm sorry, yes, to waive the first reading, thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, a roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I will entertain a motion to adopt the following policies: JEDC, BDDG, DJC, and BDC.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jernick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. Next month, I will not read all of those policy letters as we there's no way I'll get through without being tongue-tied.
As presented.
Yes, as presented, that'll be the modus operandi next month. All right, anything else that anyone has? Then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned at 6:37 PM.